there are some impacts from this chip crisis on automakers and manufacturers that might be having a very lasting effect on the industry. What I'm talking about here are incentives.
Yes.
There was an article that was published last Friday on Business Insider. The chip crisis is helping automakers and dealers do something they've wanted to do for decades: quit offering incentives and deals. Pops, I want to flip it over to you. And in a moment, just so everyone that's on the stream, we're actually going to look at current incentives and compare them to prior years past. But we'll do that here in just a moment, Dad. Dealers and automakers want to get rid of incentives. Is that the truth, Dad?
Yeah, I think so. They've been, let's face it, the American consumer, the automobile dealers themselves, and the manufacturers have been mainlining incentives for years and years and years. This was an addiction that seemed to have no end. And suddenly, because of a pandemic, the end came abruptly. And manufacturers are going, well, we like cutting our marketing expenses by 50% or more. Dealers like being able to sell cars for MSRP or more, and not have to market the vehicles that they have, the limited vehicles that they have, to the degree that they had to in the past. So ultimately, this was a great thing for dealers and manufacturers because they finally got off the crack. Okay, the addiction is over. Normally you would have a 12-step process. In this case, it was like a 2-step process. Oh, everybody's sick. We're going to stop producing cars. People are getting better. They want to buy cars. We're still not producing cars. They'll pay anything for cars. And so it just ended. It came to a halt. And ultimately, the loser in all of this, as we said before, is the consumer. The consumers are always going to end up paying more now in the future. Deals are going to be harder and harder to come by. MSRP is going to become the base selling price for something. And it could be, in many cases, it'll continue where there's additional dealer markups of $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on certain hot vehicles. So, the dealers are happy. The customers should not be.
Yeah. All right, Pops, let's actually take a peek at what's going on with incentives right now, because you did mention it. They're going away and they came to a stop, but there are still some. And let's do a comparison here so that everyone can see. So first, let's review. These incentive sheets that we're looking at, these are national programs from all of the different manufacturers that we can still get our hands on. This is from Automotive News and Industry publication. The caveat here, or like the preamble to this, is things could be different in your region, in your area.
Yes.
Videos on that in the past, Dad. Manufacturer rebates and incentives are regionalized from time to time, correct?
Oftentimes, because they'll look at a region and they'll say, oh, we have too many of these particular models in this particular marketplace in this region, so we need to have a regionalized incentive to move those vehicles.
Perfect. Exactly. So we've got, this is for this most recent week, October 11th, 2021. And side by side, we'll do a little bit of a comparison here. This is from October 14th of 2019. And just the first thing you'll notice, I'm going to do a quick scroll through.
Yes.
2019. Still going.
Oh my God.
Still going.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow.
I come back to 2021.
Yeah.
And we're done. So what we're seeing here is less incentives and then also drastically different amounts. So for example, the new model year BMWs, there's up to $2,500 in cash rebates. Also, somehow, Dad, there are special incentive financing plans at 9.2%.
Oh, that is special.
And that's not a new vehicle, not a used one. And then let's look at 2 years ago. Scroll back up to the top. We had BMWs. Okay, so interesting. Not too terribly much more in terms of cash amounts, but just a lot more vehicles that were actually accessible.
Yes, but look at the prior model year cars that hadn't been sold yet, and look at the sizes of the incentives on those.
Up to $6,000, $5,760. So let's look at prior model year right now.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be up to $4,250 less incentives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ford right now offering some incentives, really not much. They're really, I don't know if you've seen this ad, they're pushing a national ad campaign around ordering your Ford, which is something we are obviously familiar with.
Yes.
Google search or, research how to factory order a vehicle. We've got plenty of videos on that as well. Ford in prior years past, we used to get from FCA, now called Stellantis, but let's come down here to Ford. I mean, it's just a heck of a lot busier in this
Yes.
column than it is right now.
Yeah, no, they've cut back tremendously. I think 2 years ago, the average incentive on a BMW that BMW spent to sell their cars in consumer incentives was a little over $4,500 on average. Well, the top end today seemed to be about $2,500. So my guess is today's average is probably closer to $2,000. Well, that's a huge savings in marketing costs, marketing expense, when you can cut your incentives by more than half.
What do you think's happening on the other end? Because we all know, or maybe you don't, but incentives are two-sided within automotive. There's incentives that go to the consumer and there's incentives that go to the dealerships. What do you think's going on the dealership side? That are they still getting incentives from the manufacturers to hit certain thresholds and dollar amounts?
My guess would be that those type of incentives today would be tied more to customer satisfaction and service customer satisfaction than they have been in the past. It would you would be hard pressed to hold your dealer body to a vehicle sold incentive, because you're having difficulty in providing them with enough inventory to be able to reach those sales goals that you would have normally set for them in the past. So I think the incentives will take on to the dealers take on a slightly different look based on customer interactions with the dealership.
So, and that has implications, both the consumer side and the fact that like the dealership doesn't have the incentives for timing. We've
Yes.
always said, at the end of the week, or excuse me, at the end of the month or towards the end of the calendar year is a great time to buy a car. 2021 doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter. If you can find the inventory that you want and it's actually on a dealer's lot and you can get it without additional dealer markup, take that deal today, take it yesterday, take it next week. That's about as good as it's going to get in 2021 or likely in 2022 as well.
Yeah, I would think in some brands you will see some greater consumer incentives towards the end of the year, because certain brands are chasing sales titles, yearly sales titles, and sometimes they let their egos get involved. So that I'm sure because of that there'll be some additional consumer incentives towards the end of the year for certain brands.
So way to tee me up for that. Nicely done.
I'm here for you, son.